Board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. I am starting off this morning with a little bit of singing. Also starting off this morning with a little bit of talking with the person who's in front of us all. This person here whose name is Alan Paull. Alan is working for, founded Surprise Terror Games and made many games. Board games, it's what we're talking about. Board games, I'm not gonna shout. Hey! Morning.
Hooray. Good morning, Bez. Good morning, everybody.
And there is Nick. It's lovely to see you. And I am Bez, and this is breakfast time or brunchy time or whatever. And we've still got the busy brunchy board game bladder because apparently, you know, if you're in Europe, then maybe it's brunch time. It could be the busy bevy breakfast, the busy bevy board game bladder if you're in Japan, and maybe, you know, it's a bit late for. But anyway, regardless, today Alan Paull is going to talk the history of wargaming.
Well,
and
not all of it.
Just a whistle stop.
Yes.
And not this Alan, the Alan in front of us. Hello, Lolvi. It is lovely to see you. And Nick, that is such a lovely thing. And if you have any particular questions along the way, please ask them, and I will try to flash them up, and Alan will try to answer them. It's going to be a whistle-stop tour of something like 15 objects. Is that right?
Something like that. We'll just see how far we get, really, basically. I mean, I could go on about this forever, but yeah.
Yeah, so this is
something like
we can just call this part one.
Yeah,
part one of an ongoing series.
Yeah, maybe.
And morning, Aquasulis. It is lovely to see you. And as always, I like to start off talking about brilliant things. Here's a little thing which is brilliant. Brilliant things. And you came up with a brilliant thing earlier.
Dragonflies. Dragonflies are amazing creatures. The only reason I brought that one up was because when we've been going out for our walks, we tend to walk, we often walk, down by the River Ouse, which is a quarter of an hour's drive away. And we see loads of dragonflies all the time when we're walking through the fields, through the meadows by the river, and they are fantastically beautiful. So, yeah, I don't know. I must admit, I don't know much about dragonflies, except I understand that they're really ancient creatures. Have been on the earth for tens of millions of years and stuff.
Apparently, they're alien-looking machines.
Yes. So they're probably going to outlast us as well, aren't they? To be honest.
Yeah, all the insects, all the lizards, I think they're going to do fairly well. Yeah, not like us. I mean, we're actively messing up the planet. But let's I mean, okay, so there's beauty in dragonflies. I'm outside, I'm in the garden, and just like the fact that they hover, that they're so majestic, and even if what I'm seeing aren't necessarily dragonflies, just the notion of a creature almost suspended, just hanging so stationary in midair, it's incredible, isn't it?
And the size of them, because I mean, you don't expect to get insects that big. I mean, okay, they're kind of that big, something, or could be this big even. And you don't expect very big wingspan for dragonflies. Can be very big, even in the UK. I'm not quite sure what the biggest one in the UK is, but they're sizable creatures, and they have that iridescence, which what's this?
And
Oh, a steam-powered dragonfly.
yeah, I mean, if you were on the chats, maybe one day we can have you on and you can show off all your wonderful things.
Brilliant.
But let's... It's not just all about dragonflies. We do also talk about board games. And if in the chats you've got any recent highlights or indeed games that you've been playing, let us know. But we're going to start off with recent highlights, listening to music and seeing the sights, recent highlights. For me, my recent highlights for yesterday, I'm going to give a little work-related one, which is that... So you know I've been working on new versions of DL decks. So this is a black and white one for couple, and it's black and white just to check how different the suits are. I've gotten my first test deck of categorical all lined up, which I'm really excited by. And seeing it all lined up, seeing all these, so that's the horizontal. And what I realized is that this one is way too red. It needs to have more white in it, if you know what I mean. Just because a little bit less dense, do you know what I mean? Smaller triangles. And also the shapes of the things, kind of saying, okay, what's going on? But just getting that done, that for me was a recent highlight, moving towards things. Towards the final construction. I'm going to probably end up redrawing everything at least 2 or 3 more times, but this is nothing here is final by any means of the imagination, but I'm still excited by it. And also yesterday I was doing a bit of rewriting for the puzzle rule sheet, and I went to see Chris and Nicole, which is always lovely. Who's the people that have been chatting to. How about you, Alan? What are your recent highlights?
Well, the recent highlight, I actually went to a game convention, admittedly virtually. At this time of year, there's usually a conference of wargamers at Nuston Hall in Northamptonshire, but of course it was cancelled. But they put on a virtual cow conference of wargamers. So we had Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, lectures, discussion groups, games online. It was great.
Nice.
This is all war games. It's run by Wargame Developments, and this is a group of, I would have to say, mainly older folks, but very, very inventive people. It's a mixture of.
Do you think wargaming does basically attract older folks?
Not necessarily, no. For example, probably the most popular war game now is Warhammer 40k, which tends to be more of a younger, well, from my perspective anyway, a younger person's thing. So
it's interesting you cite that, because I would have thought of wargaming as, okay, it's a game about real military conflicts in the real world, if you know what I mean.
Well, yes. I mean, I tend to play historical war games, but there's a whole range, which I'm not going to cover much at all in this, because I don't know much about them. There's a whole range of science fiction, fantasy, all this kind of stuff, games out there, or completely pseudo-historical things, which a lot of people play. Now, I mean, Conference of Wargamers, and I'm one of that group, we tend towards historical games, but we do tend to do kind of what-ifs, and we tend to, a lot of the people there are very, very creative people and have been wargaming for 50 years or more, some of them.
Wow.
Including me. So we have got a lot of experience and a lot of toys. A lot of people in the Conference of War Games play miniatures war games, again, which I'm not really going to talk much about. But this was Virtual Cow was the opportunity to get together again with the guys and play some games. We actually managed to play a miniatures game over Skype, which was interesting. It was only took about an hour and a half to play, and it was using a set of rules called 1 hour World War II. So it's actually designed for quick quick miniature games. And we played over Skype so that there was a camera where we could see the board, and then we were able to give our orders to the person who's actually running the table. And that did work. I mean, Skype's not the ideal medium for that because you don't really get much resolution
Detail?
unless you've got very not much detail. But then again, it was a game with very few units. I think we had up to about half a dozen units per side. So we were playing on a kind of about a 4x4 grid or something like that. So not a very big game.
And it so sounds like a good way to do it. We've got Alan Oughton always on about the robots. We've got quite a bunch of chats in the Twitch chats today. A bit moving back, some people saying that apparently the largest is the June bug.
Oh, right.
Over like a tiny flying tank. And apparently the largest dragonfly fossil ever had 2.5 feet wingspan, according to Wikipedia. And we've got a bit of love for Hive, a bit of love for insect armies, and a bit of love for the Warhammer. And yeah.
Great, yeah.
Lovely. And apparently, yesterday's highlight for Aquasulis was testing out Xate's L-Deck prototypes. That's really exciting. I'm really excited to see these prototypes and make sure that they actually send them to me, because I know that sometimes, just a quick shout out to my own thing, I'm going to actually just send this Google form to everyone in a minute, but sometimes some people are thinking, oh, should I enter this competition? And there is no downside to entering my L-Deck design competition. Honestly, it's just a way for me to encourage people to make new games for it. And so, yeah, if it ends up not being a game that I particularly like, then I will give you all the feedback I can and all the love. And I want to foster an environment of people making games. Talking about games, let's talk about games. What have we been playing? What are their names? Games. I was talking to Alan Oughton about the 3 games that I played with my regular buddies, Chris and McCall. So, Pick a Pig. Do you know this one?
Is that? Oh yes, I played the. Is it Pick a Polar Bear variant?
There's also Pick a Dog. I think.
Yeah.
Pick a polar.
So
you've got these,
That's
and
they're quite fun.
Sometimes they have popcorn. Sometimes they have sunglasses.
Yes,
sometimes they're 1 or 2 arms. Sometimes they're different colors.
And
it's a nice game. You're picking up things that are either exactly identical to the one that you've got in the top of your stack, or something that has one difference. So there you go. That's a perfect example, because these two are exactly the same except for the fact that there's one difference. But if you went from this one to that one, that would not be allowed, because you're changing the number of arms and the color and the popcorn. So that's 3. That's way too many. You can't even have 2, let alone 3. Now, there's a little bit where once you have nothing to pick up, you say stop, and there's 1 point bonus. I just feel like that end game, the end of each round, saying stop, 1 point bonus, I feel like the art is really cute, it's lovely, but there was something unsatisfying about that. 1 point is not a lot, especially when the downside is that you lose everything. And so it means that if you feel like, okay, I've run out of things on the table, you just feel like you're being a little bit unfairly screwed. So maybe I shouldn't say that word. But it's a good game. It's a lovely game. It's a simple game. I don't think it's necessarily the best quick picking up game out there.
Well, I've been playing a little bit apart from the war games, which are a lot of the war games we do are kind of either one-offs or just for friends. They're not published games. But apart from that, I've been playing. I've actually played Dice Forge.
Ooh, the one where you're physically making up your own dice.
Yeah, that was quite fun. That was only my second game with Dice Forge. So I mean,
that's in person nice. With Charlie.
That's with family. We played it online. So yeah, that's quite fun. I can see the attraction of Dice Forge because it lends itself to lots of add-ons and extensions and expansions and stuff. Because what you're doing in that game is you start with everybody starts with 2 dice, and you have minimal income from those dice. Whenever anybody's turn starts, everybody rolls a dice and you get what you've rolled. And the whole point of the game is you're trying to upgrade the faces of your dice so you get better stuff. So it might be money, or it might be moons or fire. And
and in the physical game, you've got this little lever to crowbar it out of the die, and then
you don't have to bother to do it online. You see, it just does it for you automatically, which feels a bit like a cheat, actually.
Lose the fun of it. Isn't that tactility part of the joy?
I think so. But it still works quite well. You can do more with the visuals. You see, you can actually have, the whole fantasy environment thing. But part of the game is also when it's your turn, you can choose either to forge dice, which is basically change faces on the dice, or you can take bonus cards, which do all sorts of wacky things depending on which bonus cards you've got in play. So it might be, for example, there's one where you get a card which allows you to put more money on it, and when you stash loads of money on it, you get like 10 points, and then you can do it again for 15 points. So there's lots of cards like that, or cards which allow you to effectively get everybody to roll a dice, and you get the income from a couple of those dice. So there's lots of ways of getting victory points and ways of setting up your end game bonus scoring in there. It's a nice game. I think I'll probably play it with the family a bit, but I don't think I'm going to play it a lot, because it's one of those games where there's a huge advantage in knowing a lot about all the materials and how you can take advantage of the particular cards or dice that are in play. And that sounds to me like it would take quite a lot of time to learn. So I don't really want to learn the complex depths of it. I'd rather play it socially.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that sometimes there's a lot of joy to be had in really nailing down, but sometimes you just... the other 2 games that I played, one of them was Salad de Pointe, also known as Point Salad in English. Do you know this one?
Yeah, I played that. That's good fun. I like that a lot. It's nice and quick. It's fairly straightforward mechanics. It's quite slick. I like that. Did you like that? Did you like it?
So it's been I want to say 3rd or 4th time that I've played it. And by the way, hi CD, it's lovely to see you. Got a bit of love for Dice Forge online. So Salad de Pointe, yes, it's quick, it's simple. There's a lot of chaos. I think that your success, it's going to be a lot down to just the chaos of everyone else at the table, especially at the higher player counts. I feel like it's one of those games where you feel more control at 2 or 3 players. And it does say 2 to 6. I've still yet to play it above 4. I feel like I just imagine at 5 or 6, you're just going to have to accept, okay, this is a chaotic game, and my success isn't a reflection necessarily on the choices that I made.
Yeah, I think it's one of the better games at higher player counts of that. I mean, in a way, it's a kind of filler game. It's a relatively short game, but I think at 4, 5, and 6, it does still stand up because it's not who wins, it's what happens. It's one of those games where it's the experience that counts, I think. And you can have a little bit of influence on how things are going. And I've had a lot of fun because you're making decisions about sets to collect, aren't you? That kind of thing, and it does make a difference what you. It's
kind of like an opportunistic game.
Yes,
you can't really rely on anything. You can't make long-term strategies, but you're kind of saying, okay, out of these 3 things and these vegetables, these are the opportunities that I've got. At 2 players, you can plan ahead for your next turn, which I do quite like that aspect on 2 players. But when it is 3 or 4 players, and I can't, well, I am imagining how it is with 5 or 6, but let alone 5 or 6, with 3 or 4 players, I have found it to be very much, okay, I'm thinking about what I do this turn. All of the cards that I see are likely to be gone by the time it gets back to me. The final game I wanted to talk about quickly is Happy Farm, an old game by Portal Games, which was apparently republished. So if you look at there, it is 2011 iGames and 2015 Portal Games, so they, I guess, licensed it from another publisher. And the best parts of the game is the gimmick that you've got these animals and then you slot cards in between them if you see what's going on there.
Right.
So you've got and then you put more and more body parts in the middle. So eventually, if you are, I've never seen someone with more than 3 body parts, but it's just bits of fun. It is, again, a somewhat opportunistic game. You're racing to collect these things. We had a little bit of a discussion about the fact that in this game, time moves on and you draw a card at the start of your turn. And for me, I feel almost quite strongly that it should be at the end of your turn. And if I were to play it again, both Chris and McCall say they'd be happy to play it on another night. So we'll probably try it again, but we will definitely house rule that the drawing of the card and time moving on is at the end rather than the start. It's kind of like Carcassonne. How many people, like in the comments, let me know, do you play Carcassonne, yes or no? And do you draw the tile at the start of your turn? Or do you play like I do and say, okay, at the start of the game, everyone draws 1 tile, and then on your turn, you play that tile, and then you replace it to finish your turn.
Well, I always replace it at the end of the turn. So you have time to look at the stuff, look at the tile, look at the cards, and then make decisions or plan ahead. Yeah, I mean, I prefer that way, I have to say.
It's giving you more time to consider, and we decided that the one advantage of drawing at the start is that tension of, oh, I really want this, oh, I really want this. Am I going to draw the thing I want? Finally gets you on. No, I don't. Oh, yeah, I do. And with this game, it honestly, like, the card that you're drawing is one of 4 vegetables. It's not even like that exciting. It's not like, okay, some veg are rarer, but yeah, you know when someone takes the place you wanted to go, but you're still able to look at the thing and feel, okay, there's these multiple choices. And certainly in a game like Happy Farm, where it is low player interaction, we've got...
I think a lot of people seem to draw ahead of time in Carcassonne. It gives you a chance, especially as the game with Carcassonne, especially if you've got a big... Towards the end of the game, there's loads of possibilities. It helps to actually have a look at how you can reorient your tile and play it in particular places. If you just draw it on your turn, it'd take a lot longer, I think.
Okay, so that is the end of the... sorry, did you have another game that you wanted to shout about before we get to the main topic, Alan?
Well, I've been playing Chakra, which is good, which I think I mentioned last time, probably.
Yeah.
Chakra. I haven't been doing particularly well at Chakra, to be honest, but that's a very nice game. It's a sweet game. It's well, it's got this meditation in it, which is quite, one of the actions you can do is meditate, which is quite a fun idea. Which basically means you're resetting your actions, and it's got really nice, artwork, sweet artwork there. The game itself is quite strong. I think it's fairly straightforward. You're trying to put gems into these collections of 3 spaces, gems of different colors, and you only have a limited number of actions you can take. So it's basically your choices you're making are, which colors am I going for, and during the game you'll gradually work out which color chakras are worth more. So you're trying to take specific colors of gems and then fill in, well, the game is fill in 5 of those colored sets with the right colored gems. And the clever part of the game is that it's free to put stuff at the top, into those 3 slots at the top. So you kind of want to do that, but of course, if you're trying to get the chakras down to the bottom, get the gems down to the bottom, then it takes more time. And the actions you take, you can just see the actions. Things like move a gem down 3 or move 3 gems down 1. Those kinds of actions are the ones you're going to do. So there's a kind of benefit to start from the top, but you can also opt to spend one of your actions to put gems straight into the particular sets of groups of sets of 3. But that actually costs you an action, and you can't get that action back until you've completed that set. And when you get the gems, they're always different colours. So I could opt to put a green, a blue, and a yellow in the yellow slot there, but then I have to move those wrong colours out and fill that whole set of 3 up with yellows before I get my action back again. So part of the game is how many actions I want to spend and leave stuck, with the advantage of getting the gems down quicker, versus having actions I can actually play to move gems around. And that's quite a nice. It's quite a nice thing. I have a feeling it might be one of those games which, with a lot of play, you'd solve it, so you'd know what the best strategy might be.
I mean, I guess
I'm hoping not. Actually, I'm hoping it still have a lot of replayability. I'm hoping. It really looks good.
I mean, there's a whole separate discussion to be had over how replayable games should be. And I know I was playing it, chatting with Chris and McCall, and Chris was saying that they actually prefer just trying out new games and playing games with enough randomness that they feel like, okay, everyone's got a decent chance of winning, rather than playing a game that's a bit more numerical, where they feel like I'm probably going to be able to beat Chris and McCall.
Yeah, I think in this game, I think that it's going to be possible to figure out the best ways of doing things, I suspect.
And there is always
I've only played 4 or 5 games, I think, so I'm at the early stages yet.
I mean, games offer so many reasons, and I don't want to get stuck into this because this feels like almost something we could ramble about for an entire hour. But, games are something which we want to play and get good at because it's okay, we're learning these different systems and we're starting to navigate what the ramifications of these rules are. And there is immense joy in learning more and having that joy. But at the same time, sometimes you do want to just play for the social aspect, and you want the winner to not be obvious. And if someone is more experienced, should they always be winning? And where exactly that, how much skill versus randomness in the game? I mean, it's not obvious to me that. I mean, I know that Alan Paull in the comments is actually not a big fan of perfect information games.
Yeah. Well, there isn't perfect information in that one because you don't know the value of each of the colours. You gradually, everybody starts knowing the value of one colour. So I might know that yellows are only, and the values range from 1 to 4. So it's fairly easy maths. So I might know that yellows. At the start of the game, if I know yellows are worth only 1, then I might decide not to actually get any yellow gems. But then that's signaling to the other players that I know what yellow is and I haven't got any yellows. So maybe they won't bother with yellows either. Or if yellows are worth 4, and I immediately try to get loads of yellows, they'll know that yellows are only. So we all have this. Yeah, we all have the same values of the chakras, but we don't know what they are. And then whenever you meditate, which is basically get all the actions back, it then allows you to know another of the values of the colours. So you gradually build that information during the game. So by the time you're getting like 3/4 of the way through, you might be realising, well, I shouldn't have gone for green after all, or I'm glad I went for green because it's worth 4. So it's I think it has got quite a bit of replay, and it's that side of the game which is, I think, going to be critical. A lot of the gameplay in Chakra is you're using logic to say, right, it's best for me to do the actions in this order. Go 3 down with 1 gem, and then I'll go in my next action. I'll take the 2 down and 1 down, and then my next action I'll do something else. So you can kind of work that bit out logically. But
I mean,
it's knowing what the scores are that's important.
I played it myself at Cannes 2019, and it definitely seems like a game that I'd be very happy to play again. And I'm glad to hear that you're having fun with it.
Oh yeah.
Moving out of the normal things, my usual banter. Firstly, welcome Xate to the chat. It is lovely to see you as always, and yeah, apparently your game was Aquasulus's highlight, so, and I'm really excited to check that out. But everyone in the chat, please feel free to comment, feel free to ask any questions. We're focusing on war games in about 5 minutes. And as always, feel free to share it, spread the word, like, follow, all those good things. And I am going to ask you some very quick questions, Alan.
Okay.
Lots of these have already been asked. But for today, because the answers might be different.
Yes, there might be, yes.
Did you have breakfast?
Yes.
What did you eat?
Muesli today.
Okay.
With a pear in it, which is nice. Chopped up pear, yeah.
Other than Charlie, who I believe is sitting beside you.
Yes, she is.
Who is the last person you spoke?
Not that direction, though. She's over there. Sorry.
Who's the last person you spoke to in person other than Charlie?
Oh, crumbs. Oh, God. I can't remember. In person?
Yes.
The person at the post office who took one of the games I was sending off, I think. Yes, because we do a little bit of dispatch from SSG HQ here. God, oh, that was unfair. Not in this in this environment.
How long ago was that?
Oh God, that's about 4 or 5 days ago, I think.
That's fair.
Wow.
So, can you tell me 3 war games? They can be little teasers for games that you're going to be talking about later on. Just name them. 3 war games that you enjoy.
Paths of Glory, Quartermaster General, and Sea Strike. Now I'm going to talk about all 3 of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And unless you've got, are they actually going to be questionable this time? Yeah. Should I just change the name of that? Maybe it should be Questionably Quick, because it's the quickness which is the question.
They are quick, yeah.
Yeah, questionably quick questions. That's what I should rename that section.
I think so.
Yeah. So, yeah. Thanks.
See, the other thing is, of course, the main ingredient for my breakfast is actually coffee, which is absolutely vital. I have to have my coffee, otherwise the day will not work. I am one of those.
And that is the end of our questionably quick questions. So, now, Alan, would you do us the honors and explain what your first game is?
Well, a little bit of a preamble. I wanted to do kind of the history of wargaming through found objects. But these are not just found; these are objects I found in my wargames collection. So it's kind of restricted to what I've got, it's not going to be. There are lots of books on history of wargaming now. Loads more coming out all the time. There's I've got a couple here just to show if anybody's interested. But there's this is a good one. Peter Perler's The Art of Wargaming. This is a guide. When it said a guide for professionals and hobbyists, and I wanted to show that. I wanted to mention this particular division of wargaming between professionals and hobbyists. There's another one, another big one. If you like really big, heavy, academic-y type books, Perspectives on Wargaming, Zones of Control, Perspectives on Wargaming. That is a really nice book. it's got a couple of editors, and it's got a forward by James Dunnigan. And those of you who are in Wargaming will know that name, because he's one of the leading designers for SBI and Avon Hill, companies like that. And finally, there's another one which is an academic book which I've got, which is War and Games, which covers the kind of psychology, anthropology, and history and war studies of games, and that's really interesting too. But so there's a lot of really good books out there about the history of wargaming, and wargaming goes back ages. I mean, I mean, chess arguably is a war game. And I mean, and that's what one of the things I wanted to do less divisions, professional versus hobby. So it's really war games for the purpose of teaching leaders about war on the one hand, and that you could argue that chess is a bit like that. In the early days of chess, leaders would play chess because it gave them that logical, tactical, and strategic thinking. So that's the professional aspect of it, really. And nowadays, there's a whole range of games developed for people like the MOD and US Department of Defense for professional wargaming. I'm not going to talk about that, but I'm much more focused, I think we all are here, on the entertainment side, the hobby wargames. But it's useful to have that kind of division. My first game, yes, let's get on with it. So my first game is L'attaque. Now, this game, this is it, L'attaque. It's actually this actually came out in 1909. So it's a very early game, pre-First World War, and the object that I want to use as the kind of symbol of this. Can you still hear me? All right, hang on.
Yes, I can still hear you perfectly fine.
Glitch on sound. The object that I wanted to have is the pieces. Yeah, there's pieces. This is a piece. It's got a blank back, which is vital, and it's got a number on the front and a label. In this case, Brigadier. Now these pieces go on a square board, and because it's got a little. In this case, it's got a plastic stand. I think it would have been. They might well have been wooden stands in the original game. This is actually a modern copy made by Gibson's Games, and they did a 100th, celebrating the 100 years of Gibson's Games, and they reproduced this. So this piece has got a back, because when you put it on the board, you put it that way around, so that your opponent can't see what it is. But when you move it adjacent to an opponent's piece, you show it, and then you can see the number, and you compare the two numbers, and whoever's got the higher number wins and removes the other piece. So it's a very simple mechanic, and there are a number of special pieces which do other things, like killing any piece or just turning it over but being invulnerable. So those kind of things are in there as well. So the point of this game is that it's hidden information. That's the important thing. So you've automatically got a kind of fog of war thing. So I don't know what all your pieces are at the start, and I gradually find out what your pieces are, where your pieces are, what they are, so that I can take advantage of that tactically. And it's a very simple objective in the game, which is it's just a capture the flag. You are trying to take the HQ of the enemy.
It looks very similar to Stratego, as a kind of. Would you say that Stratego is a direct descendant? Yes.
There's a whole bunch of them derived from this idea. I think that L'Attaque was the first one. There's another early one which was Dover Patrol. I'm not sure. I can't recall which one was the first one. But when I was young, I had Tri-Tactics, which was another version of this, but it was kind of Napoleonic version. You had cavalry and infantry and artillery. So it's, you can obviously use the same concept and theme it however you like. And it uses squares, so they didn't use hexes and things like that, which is a more modern thing. It uses squares, and yeah, it's the key thing is here that it's one of the earliest games that uses fog of war in a nice, easily represented mechanic. Just literally turn it around, you can see what it is. Going the other way, we go. So this leads to one of my other games. I just want to show the modern modern version of that fog of war thing is this one. This is Napoleon's Triumph by as it says it on here, Simmons. And I've got some notes I wanted to have as well. This uses the same fundamental concept as l'attaque, in that it has I'm trying to find the pieces. So it has little blocks. So it has little blocks like this, which are blank on the back, and so you put them down on the map as a kind of row like this, and then when your opponent attacks them, you then turn them around and they see what they are. In this case, those are infantry pieces. So it's got the same basic idea, and the whole range of Columbia games, block games, are all based on this idea of fog of war by literally you can't see what's there, which is very nice. A lot of war games have got that bird's eye view where you can see exactly where everything is. And these games are attempting to introduce a fog of war element. The other thing is it has got a fabulous. Those pictures of the map don't do it justice. I mean, the map is fabulous. I'm going to show part of this map when I manage to get this out, so you can see the actual glory of this. This is the board. Now, if you can see that, I can't see how much I'm showing. This is produced like a kind of, this is Battle of Austerlitz 1805, Napoleon Triumph. It's kind of like a period map of the battlefield. This is actually only half of it, so you get double this. So it's huge, and it has these irregular areas on it, which are used to put your blocks on, and there's rules to cover all that. So I'm not going to go into any more detail on that one, but Napoleon's Triumph is a modern version of that kind of l'attaque fog of war thing, and that came out in 2007, and really interesting approach to that fog of war problem. Interestingly, the mechanics, the actual combat mechanics, are there's no dice. It's purely mechanistic. So who wins the combat depends on where you've positioned your troops and how many you've got, what the strength of the troops are, and there's no dice. You just straight see it and compare. So a lot of the game, which is very clever, is about bluff. So I might have a large large number of blocks of troops approaching. You don't know whether that's just a whole bunch of Cossacks or whether it's some Russian guards until you actually discover them. So in a sense, this is getting towards the ultimate kind of fog of war approach to board games.
Then we move on to Sea Strike.
Then we move on to Sea Strike. Sea Strike is, I wanted to use for Sea Strike my found object, if you like, is a card. Cards. My found object for Sea Strike is a combat resolution card. Looks like this. Okay, now this is a game which came out in 1974. The combat resolution is done through this. It's a modern naval war game, and so this card has got 4 quadrants and a circle in the middle. Now the 4 quadrants are all to do with this specific weapon system. So you've got top left guided missile, top right is guns, bottom left is torpedoes, and bottom right is something else which I can't remember. Air defense, I think. And this is a really clever way of doing combat results, because with this is probably one of the most genius combat resolution systems I've seen. It's not a combat results table or anything. It's literally a pack of cards. You've got loads of cards, and it allows you to do odds really easily. So, for example, if you have those cards again, sorry, Beth, we can have those cards again. Right, this is a really good picture of it. So, if you want to have 50-50 odds, you can have a blank center or a cross in the center, straightforward. If you want to have 25%, well, you've got red cross or black cross. You can do that. So you could, just by having that little mechanism of a circle with a cross in it, and the crosses have two colors.
Yeah, I don't quite understand what this represents, or is it like you decide, you flip
whenever you shoot at something, depending on what the weapon is, you draw a certain number of cards. It's usually like 2 or occasionally 4, depending on the weapon, and you look at what you've got on the card. So if I shoot a missile, I draw a couple of cards, and that tells me what the result is. If it's a missile, you can see that top left card, the explosion against the little square with the black bits in it. That means I've hit with the missile. That's what the explosion means. And so the odds of success for each of the separate weapon systems are on the card. So the whole pack of cards, you can work out what the odds are of hitting. So in this particular game, torpedoes are not as effective, for example.
So when you flip over the cards, you only look at the type of things that you're actually executing, and there's 3/4 that you ignore.
Yeah. So if I'm firing a torpedo, I'll use that in the top left card. I'll use the top right little box there. And that is a really interesting method, an easy method of doing combat results. So for a game in 1974, that is really very innovative. It also has these ship. I was going to use the other item I wanted to use was actually a China graph pencil or water-based pens, because this game, all the pieces, these are actually water-based pens that we use on this overhead projector markers. All these ship pieces in the game are plastic covered, so that you can write on them. So if you get shot at, if you lose a weapon system, you can just literally cross it out to show you've lost it. The other advantage is that because we're dealing with a modern naval war game, gamers really like to have upgrades to weapon systems. Part of Sea Strike is you buy the forces that you're going to use. So each of those counters you've got there, if you flip them over, they'll have a cost underneath, and that's how much you have to spend out of your budget, which you're given at the start of the game to create your force. So this has got so many of the components of complex war games, but executed in such a beautiful way. So at the start of the game, I'll have a mission. My mission might be sink one enemy surface ship, or it might be sink all of them, and my budget will be bigger or smaller depending on what the mission is. And I plan my force, buy the force, and then I put them out there. But with the waterproof pencil, water-based pens, you can then upgrade weapons simply by writing on the pieces.
Yeah, that dry erase system is
really
amazing. And what's your next thing? Squad leader.
Squad leader was the next one. Squad leader. Squad leader was the next one, because when you say board war games to people, they will often immediately think Hex Encounter war game. Hex Encounter is it? And there we have Hex Encounter. So my found object was going to be basically a counter that goes in a hex. So we have Squad Leader is one of the kind of seminal, very popular games, and we have a tiny. This is the thing: we always get tiny little counters with combat ratings and movement ratings on the counter, and you just put that counter on the hex, and you can see at a glance what your troops can do. Now, Hex Encounter war games go back quite a long way. In fact, the move from squares to hexes was somewhere in the 60s, really. I mean, the earliest game of this type, which didn't use hexes but used squares, was Tactics 2, and that came out in 1958 and was used and was very, very popular as an Avalon Hill game. I have got a copy of Tactics 2, but I haven't bought that here. I just want to refer back to that because Tactics 2 was also a seminal game, but it used squares rather than hexes, and really hex encounters was where board wargaming really took off. The advantage with hexes over squares is that you haven't got that distortion of movement. If you think about squares, you can move up and down and left and right, but if you move diagonally, you're moving a hell of a lot further than you are if you're just moving up and down and sideways. Hexes, although hexes also have a movement distortion, it's much, much less than using a square grid. So hexes solve that. They also give you the opportunity to have what is called a zone of control. And wargamers here will already know about a zone of control, but basically a zone of control is exerted by a unit into all the surrounding hexes, so all the adjacent hexes, of which there are, of course, 6. And that means that that single unit, although it only occupies one hex, has got an influence on a larger area. And introducing that mechanism means that you can then define what happens when an enemy unit enters that zone of control. So, for example, you can have locking zones of control, which basically mean if an enemy unit enters a zone of control, they can't leave. They can only leave through combat. Or you can have semi-locking, where they can only leave by paying more movement points. So it gives you a lot of flexibility about how you design the actual tactical interaction of your pieces. And there have been literally thousands and thousands of hex encounter war games, which have all derived from things like Squad Leader, the kind of basic idea in Squad Leader and other earlier games. Squad Leader came out in 1977, and there is an advanced Squad Leader as well, which is advanced Squad Leader is kind of more of a way of life than a game. There's huge numbers of scenarios and extra rules and theatres you can get for advanced Squad Leader. I think it's possibly less popular now than when it originally came out, but it is a way of spending a lot of money on war games, being involved in advanced Squad Leader.
And before we move on to our next thing, a quick good night to CD, and thank you very much for watching along. And I hope you have a good night's sleep. And yeah, see you soon.
Yeah, great.
So our next thing.
Right. The next one is the next one I wanted to mention was Paths of Glory. And now the reason for this one, including this one on the list, and my found object on this one. My found object on this one is the map. If you've got a picture there, the picture map. Excellent. Before we go there, excellent. The map is a point-to-point map. Now we've dealt a bit with Hex Encounter, because Paths of Glory. This isn't the first point-to-point map. You've got a totally different method of movement. So here in this game, your pieces can only be on those nodes, and the where you can move and where you can attack is defined by the lines between the nodes. So this gives the designer a lot more control over routes of advance, routes of defense, and you can reflect the historical nature of the campaign very much more easily if you're doing this, because you don't have, it's not a regular grid. You can control it. So for example, this is a good example here. So if you look at Brest-Litovsk, there's a fort at Brest-Litovsk in the center top, and to the right of Brest-Litovsk there's a row of spaces. It's Pinsk, Sarny, and Rovno. Now Pinsk and Sarny have got no connections further to the north and east. You can only get to Pinsk and Sarny through Brest-Litovsk, Kovel, or Rovno. And that means if you put troops into Pinsk, you're running the risk of having them cut off by things which take Rovno and Brest-Litovsk and the other one near Bialystok. So this, and that is actually the Pripyat marshes in Russia.
So it represents
Represents an area
unnavigable terrain. It represents natural barriers or rivers.
Natural bottlenecks are very important in a lot of war games, and this method allows you to identify those really quickly and easily. And it's just a wonderful mechanic. This game, Paths of Glory, is a First World War game, and it's also a card-driven game, which basically means that your actions are all taken through a hand of cards. And the cards, this is another innovation in wargaming, not necessarily Paths of Glory, there are others, but this is one of the most popular ones, that allows you to break the rules by sticking stuff on the cards. It also allows you to give players the choice of how to use the card. So, for example, with Paths of Glory, you can use a single card either for an event that's written on the card, or you can use it for a number of operations points, which allows you to move and attack on the board, or you can use it for replacement points, which allows you to get more troops at the end of the turn, or you can even use it for strategic redeployment, which is large-scale movement over the whole board. So you've got 4 different ways in which you can use just that one card. So it gives the designer a lot of flexibility in how to promote decision-making by players that have a massive effect on the game. You can see some cards in there. So, for example, there's a German reinforcements cards and that. So, if I play that German reinforcement card for something other than the reinforcement, it means I haven't got the army that card would give me, and I might have to get it later on.
And that's a similar system in the Totes being flipped on its head by Twilight Struggle, I guess.
It is, yes. Twilight Struggle has effectively the same type of mechanic, multifunction cards. In fact, we use it in our games, in the Ming Voyages and in the Cousins War. It's the same basic idea, although we've got obviously much simpler execution of that. So that's Paths of Glory. So the found object of this one is a cloud, actually. I might find it. Here we go. This, believe it or not, is a cloud. It's an important part of wargaming, particularly figures wargaming, is the fact you can make stuff. So Wings of War is a World War I tactical game where you use little figures of airplanes. This is the Red Baron, as you can see, and the cloud. Basically, you can hide in the cloud. Cloud. Yeah, I mean, it's similar to that. People regularly, wargamers are notorious for changing rules of war games. You won't find that very often well, not as much, I think, in things like Terraforming Mars and other Euro games. But wargamers are notorious for changing rules and expanding and contracting and simplifying and making them more complicated. And Wings of War, although you have got in Wings of War, got these planes, and each plane comes with its own cards for movement, as you can see on this particular shots. You can add things like this in it. You can add your clouds, and you can add anti-aircraft fire, and there's loads and loads of expansions for this game. But the symbolism of this is that with wargaming, particularly with figure wargaming or war games that use models, you can add your own stuff very, very, very easily, and you don't have to necessarily buy them from a major manufacturer. This is the kind of standard of my graphical or terrain kind of pieces. Not terribly great. So that was what I wanted to say about Wings of War. I wasn't going to go into the actual how the game plays in particular, but just that point that modification of war games is a very big part of even board wargaming.
Yes. And I will get into the questions in a few minutes. We're going to try to push ahead.
Why
Should
don't
we make this a two-parter, or?
Yeah, I think, but we can do that if you like. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, because we've got to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Let's do that.
If we do a 7th, because well, it's 6 out of 11. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so Lost Battle next week. In 2 weeks' time, hopefully we'll get together and we'll chat a bit more about the remaining things. That seems like a far more sensible thing.
Yes, indeed. Yes, that's good.
So the questions that we've got are, firstly, actually, let's start off with Xate's question of what is a game for someone who's new to war games and doesn't like combat of games so much, but does quite like the strategy part. Is there a war game that might tempt him? And Xate does acknowledge that they do really like Scythe, but there's not so much war in Scythe, obviously.
Yes, that's true. War games are about direct conflict. If you're trying to get into wargaming as a new player, then there aren't many war games that are relatively simple that don't have conflict in them. I mean,
Xate is an experienced gamer, but you have mentioned this one in the past.
Yes. Dominant species. Yeah, this is designed by Chad Jensen, who also designed one of the other ones on my list, Fighting Formations, and a lot of wargamers see that as a wargame because there is direct conflict between the species there. Although I think it's generally marketed as a Euro game and it's got a lot of Euro mechanics, it has also got direct conflict, which you don't normally see in non-war games, in Euro games. There's another one which I would thoroughly recommend called Race for the Rhine, which is a World War II game. I don't know if you can get that one, Bez. Race for the Rhine is a World War II game, but it's really about logistics, which sounds terribly tedious and boring. But this is the period after the Normandy campaign, when the Allies were trying to get to the Rhine, obviously, as quick as possible. And the game is actually, as a player, you are one of 3 Allied generals. So you're either Montgomery or Patton or Bradley, and you're actually competing against each other. You're not. The Germans are kind of incidental, although they're the enemy. They're kind of incidental. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to gather enough supplies in supply dumps and supply your army corps and use the roads effectively in order to maximize your ability to advance quickly towards the Rhine. So if you're looking for a game which doesn't involve direct conflict, not actual fighting very much, that's a really good one. It's got quite a lot of Euro game type feel to it, really. I think they may have done a Berlin one as well. Actually, I can't remember. But it's a really nice. It is really a 2 or 3 player game. You can play it for 2, and the other one you just leave out. But it's really nice 3-player. The interesting things are the routes that you take. You are somewhat confined in the routes, but there are some areas where you can kind of, by choice of your route, you can stop one of your allied opponents, if I can put it that way, from taking that route as well. And the supplies you have to make sure you've got are petrol to make sure that your armored forces can keep going. You need ammunition so you can actually fight, and you need food so that you can feed your troops. So you have to balance these things properly, because you can sometimes find, well, I can get to that position, but I can't fight. I can't get rid of the Germans because I haven't got any ammunition, or I've got plenty of ammunition and food, but I haven't got enough fuel to move forward quickly. So that's Race to the Rhine. It's a really nice, innovative game, I think, and it's got those little truck things, little green trucks you have. those are really important, because the whole of this Race to the Rhine is built on how many trucks you've got, and have you got the trucks in the right places at the right times. It's really good.
That's a couple of options, and I know that Sates says they have looked at dominant species already. Sorry, and yeah, so there's 2 games that you might want to check out. Aquasulis is asking how you consider games like Memoir 44 and Root. How do they fit into the notion of wargaming?
Well, I haven't actually played Root, I'm sorry to say, so I'm not quite sure how that fits in. Memoir 44 is a classic World War II. It's a classic World War II game. So that, in a way, there's I've mentioned 2 main types: the professional and the hobby game. Well, within the hobby game, there are what I would call kind of, I was always going to say mass market. No war game is really mass market, but there's the games that are going to sell more copies. That things like Memoir 44 are aimed at a more of a mass market than the Hex Encounter complicated games.
Is it basically a difference in focus between approachability and simulation?
Yeah, so well, partly. Memoir 44, in my view, isn't really a good simulation of World War II combat. It has some fairly significant flaws, but it does reflect to an extent some of the command restrictions that you have. The nice thing about Memoir 44 is that you've got loads of troops. You can't do exactly what you want with them, because you have to use command cards to move the troops, and those command cards might not allow you, for example, to use troops on the right flank. They might only be restricted to using troops in the center and the left flank. So you're basically having to make your plans and move your troops and use your combats in relation to what cards you've got, rather than in relation to what you exactly want to do. So whereas a lot of Hex Encounter games, for example, you can move all of your stuff whenever you like. On your turn, you move all of your stuff. In Memoir 44, you have to have the right cards to be able to move your troops, and you almost invariably in Memoir 44 you can't move everything. You only move some things on your turn, and you're having to make that decision. Okay, well, I could move 2 troops, two units on the left flank, attack there, or I could maybe move 3 in the center, but I really want to attack on the left. It's that. So those are giving really difficult decisions to players. Part of wargaming, a large part of wargaming, is making sure that players have good quality decisions, tough decisions to make in order to push the action on. So you should be able to plan ahead, but have good, tough decisions to make.
Okay, a couple of questions from me. This sort of, I mean, it occurs firstly whether this was an innovation by Memoir 44, and whether it then fed into more simulation orientated war games. And do you think that this card driven narrowing down of the options is a good simulation of what a commander would normally have to do within?
Well, yeah, Memoir 44 is one example of a whole range of games which are designed by Richard Borg that kind of use that basic mechanism. There's a fantasy version, Battle Law. There's even a science fiction version, Red Alert, which some people have heard of, which is a new one that's come out. They all use the same basic mechanism of restricting what players can do by which particular command cards they happen to have in their hand at that time. Now, a key thing in wargame design is whether you're modeling or trying to model what actually happened, the process that people went through to do commanding troops, or whether you're designing for effect, for outcome. And I would think that with Memoir 44 is definitely designing for outcome. So basically it's saying we know in battles that commanders didn't were not able to do everything they wanted to do. And so the random draws of cards are a reflection of that process of friction, if you like. That means the commander can't do everything that he wants to do.
And looking at battle lore, I mean, it's clear that this is not a simulation-based game. And I guess it gets into that whole topic of, okay, what is a war game? Which almost feels, again, like a discussion of its own, like defining it and whether there's interest and use in those semantic arguments even.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer to, well, I'm more on the simulation side myself. I tend to try to do a model that reflects more what people actually did rather than for the outcome of what happened, if that makes sense. So, for example, with that Memoir 44 type system, you could have made a plan which relied on you having loads of troops on your left flank and attacking on the left flank. Now, if you make that plan, but then you don't draw any cards that allow you to move troops on the left flank, you've kind of stymied yourself. And war, although there is friction in war and things don't happen in accordance with your plan, the fact that you could be, the fact your plan could be completely destroyed by lack of particular randomly drawn cards doesn't feel right to me on the simulation side. So I would prefer, one of the games that I was going to look at next time is my game Mission Command Normandy, which models to an extent command structures. And in that game, you give orders to your troops. So in that case, I give orders to my troops on the left flank, and after delay, they would then carry out those particular orders, and they will keep carrying out those orders until such time as the situation changes or I give them new orders. Now, the friction we get in this simulation-based aspect of it is having another player. So I might give orders to my subordinate on the left flank. He or she will interpret those orders in a specific way, and he might not interpret them in the way I wanted them. Yeah.
And that Questionably talks about how this is different levels of abstraction, and it occurs to me that it's not just a linear scale, it's also what parts do you want to simulate. You talked about simulating the results versus simulating the process that the general or commander or whatever would kind of go through. And you can have parts of a game will have to be abstracted, but I guess it's always a choice of what do you abstract away and what is the core focus. And
yes, exactly. Yeah. So in a sense, some people argue all war games are models, and a model is always abstracting from reality. So it's always going to leave some things out, obviously. And it's a major question when designing is, what am I focusing on? So if you look at Race to the Rhine, right? Race to the Rhine is focusing on the logistics. And it's a really good representation of that logistics, and they make it nice and straightforward, but give players those really key, interesting decisions to have to make about how to do it. But the Germans are really abstracted out as a set of cards. There's the Germans are not the focus of the game. Fighting the Germans isn't the focus of that game. It's the logistics, and that's what they've been trying to do, which is an interesting way of approaching wargaming. Certainly.
And I think that what if we move on to let's do a quick recap. There's definitely been a lot of stuff that we've had, hidden information coming up with, and some people mentioned Stratego. I don't know if Stratego is a reasonable thing for Cook, although that feels horribly abstracted.
Yeah, Stratego is I haven't got the thing in front of me, but Stratego is like L'Attaque, which we...
Yes, absolutely. And would you actually consider L'Attaque a war game by today's standard?
Oh yes, definitely. Yes. Yes. I mean, one of the you can make war games really simple. I mean, I've heard of somewhat facetious comments, you can do a World War I simulation with a single dice. You can say the Germans win if they roll a 6, all the other rolls the Allies win, and that's a model. That's a kind of that's a design for outcome, if you like. So you work up from there. So yes, certainly. If a game has got direct conflict, usually where you've got some kind of maneuver space, some kind of moving of pieces around, and some kind of combat, i.e. direct conflict, that's pretty much the definition of a war game, if in a purely mechanistic way. There are some really good definitions of war games in some of these books here, which we can probably go into next time. But we don't need to do that, I think.
It's just good to acknowledge that there are different things that a game of any sort can focus on. Indeed, some of these things, some people might call war games, some people might not, but let's not get bogged down in that. We've learned about hidden information. We've learned about card-based combat and dry erase in Sea Strike. We've learned about hexes in Squad Leader. We've learnt about point-to-point based thing. There we go. The point-to-point based maps. And we've also learnt about the user-created stuff with the cloud. I don't know if you still have a cloud nearby you to hand, or if you put it away.
The cloud, yes.
And yeah, so this has been a brief whistle-stop tour, and yeah, we'll get to everything in a couple of weeks. And thank you everyone for watching. Alan Outson says Stratego is a great game. I couldn't describe it as a war game though.
Sure. People have different definitions.
So let's us get to the end of the show, where I always ask people, what are you looking forward to? And what are your daily hopes and ambitions? Personally, my daily hope / ambition is to get Puzzle completely rewritten. I've started writing the history, which includes the boundless skepticism of Ian Vincent, where I credit them. Honestly, they made hearing them talk down the whole concept of a game system and inject all their concerns did make me reevaluate what I was doing, made me limit the number of games, which I'm really glad I did. So I was like, okay, I'm going to have all these other games online or something, but I'm going to focus on a few core games, as I called them. And I think that was a really strong design choice. Yeah, Ian is brilliant in many ways. And but yeah, I'm hoping to get that written, to get it sent off, to go to the post office, and there's a couple of other things on my to-do list. Honestly, I'm not going to make any global hopes or ambitions. The thing that I am looking forward to is actually just weird as it is, just having that quick cycle outside to the post office, and also my daily. I know it's very short and it's almost embarrassingly short, but my 3 minutes walk outside just to play a little bit of Ingress to make sure that I've stretched my legs and I've not been stuck in the house all day.
Very good. I mean, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to be doing today, to be quite honest. But I'm kind of looking forward to doing some more work on Kingmaker and Snails and Grails. That's the main thing. I've got Kingmaker playtests coming up in the next few days, so I'm quite looking forward to that. So the next stage of Kingmaker and Snails and Grails is what I'm really looking forward to. Snails and Grails, for those that didn't know, is a game I'm working on with Dave Mortimer and Rob Harper. Cooperative 1 to 4 players game, which we'll talk about another time, perhaps. Not now.
Sure. And do you have any daily hopes or ambitions you wish to speak of?
well, that was it really. Continuing with my game development work is what I'm really looking forward to doing. The context, because I'm part of Surprise Star Games, we always have things coming up. Things happen, so there's always the admin to do, which you still have to do the admin, even though we're not
you need to do all the boring parts.
Yeah, all the boring parts happen as well, and we're looking forward now to getting copies of the Ming Voyages and the March Progress. Hooray! In fact,
proper manufactured copies of your own game.
I'm expecting them I'm expecting them to be couriered to me. It'll probably arrive tomorrow or the next day. The first copies that I actually have in my hand is always a good thing. So just one of each I should be getting in the English games, which is very exciting because there's always that kind of feeling: is everything actually going to be all right? Well, you'll know that as well, won't you, Bez? There's always that feeling until you've got a copy in your hand and looked at it. There's always that
nagging feeling that it'll be all terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully we'll never suffer something like that. But you know how horrible. Like Fruit Bandits, again by Ian Vincent. A terrible job was done on the production of that.
Yes.
It is the worst. And anyone in the comments, let us know. Sate is looking forward to playtesting with Alan Alton. That sounds exciting.
Right. Yeah.
Please, everyone, as I wind down, remember to share, follow, and just spread the word, because I am doing a stream every morning at 10 a.m. UK time. And the next stream, I should say, if you want to check out Surprise Star Games, there is Alan Paull is at surprisestargames.co.uk, Benfamfish or Surprise Star on Twitter, or Alan Paull on BGG, and that is the email if you wish to email. And my next streams are going to be tonight. I am doing the Tuesday trials where we try out new games, and we're trying out 2 games that, one of them is entirely a thought experiment right now. So it's a written form of alphabetical. I think it should work well. I can't solo test it, because it relies on the player interaction to bring the game to a conclusion, but I think it should work, so we will find out together. The other game is a game by Fortessa Scott, it's called Mansplaining, where you mansplain a topic and then you try to inject some keywords. Tomorrow we're having Yoshida talking about religion in games, learning in games. Thursday, Calvin is talking about why writing is important in games and fiction. Then a prize play along on Thursday. Friday, 10 a.m. I'm going to be talking about the L deck. And that is that. I've already done a recap. It has been lovely as always having you, Alan. If you want to check me out, softbybears.com, twitter.com/softbybears, instagram.com/softbybears, twitter.tv/softbybears, facebook.com/thingsbybears, or softbybears@gmail.com. And thank you. I'm sorry to hear that, but fingers crossed your knee will get better. I'm sending positive energy, good thoughts your way. And thank you everybody for watching along. Thank you, Nick, for joining. It was lovely to see you. And Alan, and Lolvi, and Aquasulis, and CD. It was lovely to see them. And Sate, it's always lovely to have you. And basically, everyone, thank you, everyone. I'm glad that you got something out of it. And most importantly, it has been, as always, a delight.
Thank you, Bez. Thank you very much indeed. It's been very enjoyable. Let's do it again.
Yes, I agree. Let's make it a tradition.
Yes.
I mean, you kind of have.
Well, we have really, haven't we? Yeah. But I mean, yeah, we should do a little bit more of this. I mean, what I've tried to do with these is not make them academic, which I hope is okay. But very much focusing my own perspective on it, really. But if people want to put more questions in, then I'm happy to try to.
Yeah, I'm going to try and just to let people know, I'm going to try and start putting these up as early as I can, maybe even working a week ahead to get them up on Facebook, and I'll link to them on the Twitter. On Twitter, why did I put? I'm turning into an old person with it's the Twitter and the Facebook and the Instagram. Anyway, you know that thing that you kids all know these days. But in all seriousness, so on Facebook, you are able to, or YouTube, I think that any comments that you post there, I will see as soon as I load it up. But Twitch is it's just best for all the chat at the time. I think there is one person watching it on Facebook. If you want to do a lot of text chats with people, there's a lot more chats happening on Twitch. And yeah, there's lots of Alan solidarity. Yeah, and yeah.
Thank you, Alan.
There is only one thing left to do, and as always, feedback and stuff. I know that everyone who's commented today has been very respectful, and I'm genuinely just want to take 30 seconds to say that I am incredibly happy and grateful to have brought together, let's say, this small community of people who are so respectful and kind, and the way that you're saying, oh, hi, good morning, it really warms my heart. Do you know what I mean? And the fact that playtesting each other's games and teaching each other backgammon and stuff, it's really nice to see, making relationships. And because you're all respectful, you're all invited to, give constructive criticism in a respectful manner. The only thing left to do, as always, is to say bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is the goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye, everyone.